guys, the big brother of history and chess here, and today I'm going to cover in this video the Sicilian Wars, or rather the First Sicilian War. And this is a forgotten war, but it's also a very interesting war, which shows the history of the Carthaginian Empire that nobody even remembers, and it shows the history of the Greek city-states during the time of the first and second Persian invasions. And this also happened during the time of Alexander the Great's invasion of Macedonia. And so in this video we're going to cover the First Sicilian War and its effects it had on everybody. So the First Sicilian War is very interesting. In fact, every Sicilian War is interesting, and I consider this conflict really interesting. So let's actually begin this ancient war. But first, a brief history of Sicily. Sicily began being colonized by the Greeks in the 8th century BC, and began being colonized by the Phoenicians sometime later, after the fall of Tyre and after they had spread out across the Mediterranean. And after Carthage received its independence from Phoenicia, well, obviously the Phoenician stance and position in Sicily became even more tense, because now there was actually professional soldiers and a professional army which Carthage could use to reinforce its position on the island of Sicily. And the Greek Sicily and Italian Greece was called Magna Graecia, and Carthaginian Sicily was Carthaginian Sicily. And during this time, the Roman kingdom arose, because it wasn't the Roman Republic yet. Remember, that was only in 509 BC, and we're talking about some time before that. So obviously we don't care about them yet. In fact, we're not going to care about them for this entire Sicilian Wars series at all, except for one minor part in which there's a man named Pyrrhus of Epirus, but we'll talk about that later. So eventually the Greeks and Phoenicians became so aggressive towards each other that, well, there was a battle at Lilybaeum, which, well, let's get to the actual battle. In 580 BC, a man named Pentathlus decided to lead an expedition to Sicily, and it followed him because he decided to, found a new city, and it was very interesting, also because he claimed descendancy from Heracles. So he founded a city, obviously, but it was right next to the Phoenician city, Matia. And the Phoenicians said, "You get off our land." And, well, obviously, the Phoenicians didn't like the fact that the Greeks were colonizing cities right next to their own. So obviously there was a battle. There are two accounts of the battle, and we'll go through each one of them. So the Phoenicians decided to meet the colonists in battle, and obviously they were aided by the Elmians, which were a tribe in Sicily. The first account is by Pausanias, and the second account is by Diodorus. And these guys are two historians, obviously, who recorded the battle. Obviously not much details are there, so someone make things up, because I don't actually know the actual composition of the units, but I'll say the Phoenicians were just a little bit bigger than the Greeks in both occasions. Which conclusion should we accept? Let's take both and try to merge it. Note the Elmians are in the blue. Well, the orange is the Greeks and the green is the Phoenicians. Obviously, Pentathlus led the Greeks, and Well, obviously they were destroyed according to Pausanias. Yeah, Pausanias. And it's very minimal. I don't even know anything what happened. They just retreated and they decided to return home. Let's look at the second account. Diodorus' account is a little bit more detailed and states that when the colonists, led by Penthilus, obviously, when they arrived, they found the Greeks of Selinus at war with the city, the Elmian city of Segesta or Egesta. So the colonists decided to aid Selinus in their ongoing war against Segesta. Now, the Elmians trace their history back to Troy. Well, the siege of Troy probably happened, in all honesty, between the Hittites and Mycenaeans. And, well, Diodorus does not say anything about the Phoenicians. There's no reason to believe they didn't help the Elmians, and in all likelihood, that's probably what they did. The Phoenician army was, again, probably a little bit bigger than the Greek army because of the outcome of the battle. Again, the Elmians are blue, the Phoenicians are green, the Greeks are orange, and the Greeks probably commanded by Penthilus. And the battle probably went as a draw until the Greeks were destroyed and Penthilus was killed. So the colonists decided to return, but where would they go? Well, they decided to go to the Aeolian Islands, where they established some sort of a pirate nation, and it prospered. But nothing else happened other than they went to the island of Lipara. And the expedition ended in a failure, but this is not the end of the First Sicilian War. This is in fact just the beginning. For around 70 years, there was somewhat of a peace. Until around 510 BC, a man named Dorius decided to capture Eryx, which was a Phoenician/Elmian city. So Dorius tried to found a city in North Africa, and he failed. So he decided to first fight in Italy to get to Sicily, and that's exactly what we did, but we don't have any information on that, so I can't really cover that. So he was the younger son of Cleomenes, who was the king, and he was the brother of King Leonidas of Thermopylae. So he decided to seek his fortune for that reason. So he decided to capture a city. He gathered a small band of adventurers and 4 other Spartans. And he wanted to capture it. You can guess what happened. There was a battle, obviously. Let's see what happened. The Greek army was probably really small and was probably heavily outnumbered. And, well, as you can guess, Darius was killed. Most of the Greek army had been massacred in the disaster of Eryx. Obviously, they held the city long enough to rename it Heraclea, but it didn't go over so well. And Aurelian survived the disaster. He took his men that survived, and he captured a nearby Greek settlement at Minoa, and then his army decided to go south and helped the inhabitants of Silanus overthrow Pythagoras, the tyrant, and then he threatened to become a tyrant himself and was killed. And obviously we don't have any information about this, but it was pretty messed up. And now let's get to Himera. Well, no, not Himera yet. Let's get to Gelon. In 733 or 734 BC, Greek settlers from Corinth founded the city of Syracuse. But around 688 BC, Greeks from Rhodes and Crete decided to found Gela. And Gela is most notable because of the tyranny. However, before the aforementioned tyranny, there was something called an oligarchy in basically all of Greek Sicily, which is also called Magna Graecia. So I think it means Great Greece. So an oligarchy is a form of power in which power belongs to a group of people, not many people, but small amount of people, usually nobles, and it's not a bad way of running a country or a state or a city or something. But honestly, and then there was tyranny. So honestly, there was a man named Cleander of Gela. So Cleander of Gela was a person, obviously. But what did he do? Well, in 505 BC, he basically set up somewhat of a coup against the city. He threw out the oligarchy and he became a tyrant. And he ruled for 7 years, and he was murdered in 498 BC by a citizen of Gela named Sabellius. And Sabellius, he wanted to see introduction of democracy, but there never was one yet. I mean, I say yet because it's not time for the Roman Republic to appear, or it's not time for the city and the Senate to appear. But so Sabellius, he never got to see democracy in his lifetime. So instead, it was somewhat of a failure, and instead, power became transferred to Hippocrates of Gela. And this man is the next important person who we're going to talk about in the Sicilian Wars. So basically, Hippocrates, he succeeded Cleander in 498 BC, and he began to pursue a more expansionist policy, and he conquered most of southern Sicily, and he almost conquered Syracuse. And he made his city-state great and powerful, controlling almost all of Greek Sicily. And this was shocking to a lot of people, but honestly, it was expected. But Hippocrates, he besieged Syracuse. Obviously, we have no true record of what actually happened, but we have another thing. So, let's get to that. However, let's first talk about the composition of his army. So, his army was mixed, basically like many armies of the time. He had a bodyguard of spearmen and a cavalry force. And his successor, we'll talk about later, Gelon, who was first a spearman of the guard, and then he was commander of the cavalry, not surprisingly. And I don't know if he had phalanxes. He could have, but I don't think they even existed yet. So, that's what we know about his army. But, let's talk about what cities he captured. So, he captured Calliopas, Naxos, Zancle, and Leontini, in that order. And obviously he also captured a lot of other things. Obviously, why did he capture these cities? To become prosperous, wealthy, gain an empire, and become powerful. He succeeded in all these things. So, after the end of the Ionian Revolt, which I did make a video about on the channel, it's on another channel. It's on one of my other channels. It's the first part. Well, I don't know if I'm really going to continue it is not really great, like how I did it. But honestly, I might continue it. Who knows? But after the Battle of Lade in 494 BC, the inhabitants of the island of Samos decided to leave their home because it was now under Persian control, and they decided to go to Sicily. So Zanko was ruled by Scythes. So he invited the Samians to come to Sicily and settle in the new city he decided to found. The Samians agreed, but they stopped at Rhegium, a Greek city that was on the Italian side of Messina, and Anaxius, who was a tyrant of Rhegium, convinced him to seize Zanko instead of settling in the new city. Zanko was undefended, strangely. Scythes was away to the west, establishing his new colonies, and so Samians took it. Why not? Samians took it, And so Scythes discovered what happened. He decided to call help from Hippocrates. So Hippocrates, not the doctor, he arrived at his army, but instead of restoring Scythes, he arrested him, and then he came to a region with the Samians. Talk about being rude. They decided to abandon Anaxius, and they allowed to keep Zanko. So the former inhabitants of Zanko were sold into slavery. Again, talk about being rude. So Hippocrates gave the 300 most important citizens to the Samians to be executed, but the Samians decided, you know what, we already done so horrible things to them. We'll spare these guys. So Zanko stayed part of Hippocrates' empire, but was lost after his death, because Gelon was not so great, for obvious reasons, which we'll find out later. So then Hippocrates decided to capture Syracuse, and here we come to the decisive battle of 492 BC. Hippocrates, who was a Carthaginian, began to smash the Greek Syracusans, and soon they fell easy prey and were destroyed. The Battle of the Helorus River was a great success for Hippocrates, and he had conquered Syracuse, meaning he had conquered a Greek city, meaning he had expanded Carthaginian territory because he was technically Carthaginian. Gela, the city, had been expanded, and he had won. I mean, he wasn't Carthaginian. He wasn't expanding Greek. He wasn't even expanding Carthaginian territory. He was actually just expanding his own empire. So, if I said he was Carthaginian, I was wrong. He was actually a Greek. And his Hippocrates is 100% a Carthaginian name. I mean, Greek name. After the battle, Hippocrates obviously decided to move towards Syracuse. And, well, he didn't capture it because of Corinth. Well, not Corinth. Corinth is in Greece, and that's where the Persian Wars were taking place, the Greco-Persian Wars. But the Corinthian colony of Corcyra, decided to stop Hippocrates, and Hippocrates was like, alright, you know what? I'll return the prisoners, I'll leave Syracuse alone, and you give me Camarina, which is a colony of Syracuse, on the Hip River, Hipparis, which is east of the city of Gela. However, what about Hippocrates' army? What was it made of? Well, we know he had a bodyguard of spearmen, and he had a cavalry force. And he commanded several mercenaries, Sicel mercenaries, and the Sicels were native inhabitants of eastern Sicily, because remember, there was native tribes there. There was not just Greeks, and there was not just Phoenicians or Carthaginians. Well, Phoenicians are basically Carthaginians. Phoenicians are the ancestors of the Carthaginians. So, Sorry for that. So, in 505 BC, I think I said this already, I'm not sure, I'll say it again. 505 BC, just to recap, Cleander seized power, and 7 years later, he was murdered by Sabulos. So Hippocrates was like, alright, you know what, I have to take up my brother's reigns. So, the cities he captured was, in this order, Gallipolis, Naxos, Zancle, and Leontine. And for geography, Galla is south of Italy. Naxos is on the east coast, and Zancle is in the northeast, while Leonti is in the south. Gallipolis was a colony of Naxos, so probably was located in the northeast. So he probably conquered all this. So after the Battle of Lade in the Ionian Ionian Rebellion, which is part of the Greco-Persian Wars, some of the inhabitants of Samos, which was near Lade, decided to leave their home, and so they decided to colonize Magna Graecia, which means Great Greece. It's basically Italy and Sicily, or south of Italy. So they decided to leave because it was now under Persian authority, and so the city of Zancle, the aforementioned city of Zancle, was ruled by Hippocrates for Scythes. Right, Scythe. Scythe was a native of Kos, so he invited the people of Samos, who came come there, to come to Sicily and settle in a new city he wished to found, which would be on the north coast. So they agreed to this, but they stopped at Rhegium, which was a Greek city on the Italian side of Messina. I don't know where that is. Well, it's in Italy. It's the Straits of Messina. So Eryx, the tyrant of Rhegium, said, okay, you know what? Don't settle a new city. Take Zancle. Do it and weaken Hippocrates. I'm kidding, I think he said the last part, but so Zancle didn't have any defenders because Scythe was in the west, like away from Zancle, because he wanted to establish a new colony, and so the people of Samos decided to take the city. Well, so when Scythe had discovered what happened, he decided to say, Hippocrates, like, come on, let's go, beat them. So Hippocrates came, and instead of restoring Scythe, he arrested him, and then he came to agreement with the Samos. So they abandoned it in Sixalis, and they decided to keep Zancle. So the former inhabitants of Zancle, pathetically, were sold into slavery. So Hippocrates gave the 300 most important citizens of the Zancle to the people of Samos to be executed, but the people of Samos was like, you know, we're not killing these people. So Zancle remained part of Hippocrates' empire, but sadly it was lost after he died. So that's too bad. So what did he do after that? He fought against the aforementioned Sicels. Remember, they inhabited eastern Sicily. He gained a lot of victories, and he captured several not-named cities, and he captured the city of Eryx, which the bunch of his mercenaries came from there. I don't know why he did that. Nobody knows. This is all said by Polian. So he posted the mercenaries from Eryx close to the sea, and the rest of his army between them and Eryx. He sent his cavalry to capture this empty city, and then he turned on his mercenaries and he massacred them, and then he had the town, but he lost a lot of his troops. So in the next year, he decided to attack. Hibia. So, I don't know what happened there. All I know, Hibla. So, those 5 cities on the island named Hibla. So, I don't know which one it is, but it's probably close to Gelon. So, he decided to attack the Sicil city of Hibla in 491 BC. But, he was killed, and it's not too bad. He was succeeded by Euclides and Cleander. But the people of Gela decided to say, alright, no, we're not having any more tyranny. We're not having an oligarchy. We're going to have, I don't know what we're going to have. So, Euclides and Cleander were overthrown. And, Gelon defeated this guy named Gelon, who was the commander of Hippocrates cavalry, defeated the people of Gela, but that he removed Euclides and Cleander, probably killed them, and he became the tyrant of the city of Gela itself, which would inevitably lead to another battle in the Greco-Punic Wars. Gelon captured Syracuse, and he, after using ethnic cleansing, deportation, and enslavement, he made the cities an empire. Now, here's another guy, Theron. Theron had conquered the Sicilian and Sicilians, and he was the tyrant of Agras. So, Theron and Gelon decided to marry and see each other's families, thus creating a united Greek empire in Sicily, which would fight the Sicilians and Ionian Greeks, even though they themselves, they were Dorian Greeks, meaning they were Greeks of the mainland, or the Ionian Greeks, or the Greeks of Asia. Like I told you so. They're still Greeks still. So, remember Xerxes of Regium? Well, he was like, you know what? I captured its ankle. Why not make myself more powerful and ally myself with Terellus? Terellus was tyrant of Himera, and for some reason, and Xerxes decided to, not some reason, he married the daughter of Terellus. So, Himera and Regium decided to ally themselves. Remember, Zangel is in the north, and Himera is like in the north, like the north top of Sicily, like all the way to the west part. So they became allied to Carthage, and these two guys, Terellus and Xerxes, decided to become friends with the Magonid dynasty of Carthage. So Selinus, which was a city of the Tyrians, which bordered Theron, became an ally of Carthage, maybe because they were scared of Theron, or maybe because Megar Hibilla was destroyed by Gelon, which was the mother city of Selinus. So 3 blocks. The Dorians, not the Dorians, the 3 blocks by 483 BC, the Ionian Greeks dominating the north, the Carthaginians of the west, and the Dorians, the east and the south. The Sicils and the Sicans
inside Sicily, decided to remain passive, and did not hinder the movement of Greek forces. The Ionians decided to join the Carthaginian alliance. But remember, the Ionians are basically helping the Carthaginians. So, the city of Himera requested Helorus, the tyrant of Eryx, from 570 to 554 BC to rule the city of Himera. So Hieron decided to say, okay, you know what? If this guy rule Himera, then I will too. So he deposed Tyrannus and he added Himera to his Ionian to the Dorian Greek Empire, which was an empire, by the way. So Tyrannus had obviously come to power. How? Well, there was an oligarchy in almost every city previously, but now it's basically all tyrants. So he decided to expel the oligarchy, and these guys had taken refuge in Hagras. But he did not have the support of the masses. So Hieron was like, I know he doesn't have support of the masses, check him out. So Tyrannus requested Hamilcar, who was the ruler, basically almost emperor of Carthage, and Saint Xenia, who was the friend of Tyrannus, prayed. So, and his side, in his sixth class, also, and I was that, let's help him. And he sent his own children as hostages to the city of Carthage as a sign of his loyalty. So Hamilcar decided to build up his army. But what was his army? Going back in 550 BC, Mago of Carthage became the king, and he was like, you know what, we're gonna make Carthage, we're gonna make it dominant. So, Mago allied with the Etruscans against the Greeks, against the Greeks of Sicily. So he set out a bunch of reforms which would strengthen Carthaginian power. So, there was a lot of soldiers. What do I say? So, obviously, let's go to Hamilcar's diplomatic history as a prelude to see. Maybe he allied with the Persians because the Persians decided to attack on the same day in the second Persian invasion. I think it is, second Persian of Greece. So Carthage decided to sign a treaty with the Roman Respublica right when the Roman Respublica was formed in 509 BC. So, they also had a similar treaty. They also had treaties with the Etruscans and the Greeks. So, what happened after that? Well, he decided to lead an expedition to Sicily in 480 BC. So, the Greeks of the mainland had decided to send a message to Gelon saying, you know what, help us. King Xerxes the Great of Persia is attacking us, help us. So Gelon was like, you know what? Why you Greeks spurn my request of aid against the Carthaginians? But he decided to send 24,000 footmen, 4,000 horsemen, and 200 warships. And he decided to provision the Greek force if he was made the supreme commander of Greece. So, the Spartans were like, nah. And Gelon was like, you know what? Please just make me either land or naval forces exchange for my help. And Athenians were like, nah. And the Greeks had to leave with nothing. So Gelon decided to say, you know what? I'm sending 3 ships to you under Cadmus of Colossus to Delphi. So instructions to offer his submission to Xerxes in case of victory of Persia. Which had happened, by the way, if you don't know that. There was no Persian victory. So Hamilcar decided to assemble an army of 300,000 soldiers from Iberia, Sardinia, Corsica, Gaul, and Africa. So mercenaries like the Iberians, along with war chariots, 200 warships, and 3,000 transports. So to modern historians, numbers are obviously inflated. The Punic army may have not been that much larger than the Greek coalition, so they had no siege engines, and the Etruscans and the Elmians were not part of the Carthaginian army. So the core units came from Africa, and they fought in a close formation, armed with long spears and round shields, wearing helmets. The light Libyan infantry carried javelins and a small shield. The Iberian infantry wore purple bordered white tunics and leather headgear and fought against phalanx, armed in long, heavy javelins, long body shields, and short thrusting swords. Sardinian and Gallic infantry fought in their native gear, but who could bet Carthage? So Gelon and Theron had a well-trained, battle-tested army at their disposal, meaning they had a lot of soldiers. They hired mercenaries, decided to be in their fort, join their army. So Gelon was like, you know what, take a loan from you citizens, which funded his war efforts, which shows how serious the situation was. So the Syracusan army at Himera numbered at least 50,000 footmen and 5,000 horsemen, which is maybe another exaggeration, and the size of army of Theron is not known. Main hoplite army came from the citizens of the Greek cities, which is really messed up because why would you put citizens are going to be killed? It's going to weaken your economy, it's going to destroy your state, it's going to destroy everything. So mercenary hoplites came as well, and some of the citizens served as light infantrymen, or peltasts. The others formed the cavalry units. So sickle and sickened soldiers served in the Greek army. So Hamilcar, for some reason, chose to sail to Selinus and then attack Agras, although that was closest to Carthage. So the Carthaginian fleet, escorted by 60 triremes, sailed to Panormus instead. So he probably chose this route because restoring Helorus was his objective that was most important. The conquest of Sicily, if that was a consideration, took second place to his duty as a friend of Turellus. So the fleet was battered by storms at sea, losing the ships carrying the chariots and horse, which would be a factor in the coming battle. The Greeks, able to muster 200 ships, did not contest the crossing, and in fact, Greek fleet, played no part in the coming battle. So Hamilcar reorganized his forces. Again, I'm going to go to the battle real soon. Don't worry about that if you're saying worse to battle. He began to reorganize his forces at Panormus and repaired his battle fleet. He marched along the coast to Himera, and the fleet sailed alongside and encamped in the city. So Theron was already present in Himera with his army, but the Greeks did not interfere with the Carthaginians. So the Greek allies of Hamilcar, Selinus and Xerxes, were absent and never joined the battle. So the Carthaginians erected 2 camps. The sea camp was set to the north, and the army they had a separate camp to west of Himera, and land and sea camps were joined by siege works. So it's not known if Hamilcar wished to build siege weapons at Himera or settle the issue of the battle. So after the camps were erected, Punic ship dropped off provisions at the sea camp and were sent to Sardinia, Africa for more supplies. 20 triumphs patrolled the sea. The rest of the ships were reached in the sea camp. And Himera was not fully invested. East and south sides were open. So let's finally get to the battle of Himera. Hamilcar ended at Panormus and moved eastward to help Cyrillus, the former tyrant of Himera, and was replaced by Hieron of Agrigras. This is in autumn 480 BC, and Hamilcar I Mago, King of Carthage, wished to take the city. There was two camps, one in the west, the naval camp, and one in the east, the one next to the city, and the defenders sallied out with all their might, and Hieron organized this sally. Hieron, however, was outnumbered and desperately outmatched. As the two sides came closer, the battle would quickly spiral out into a complete loss. Hieron's army was crushed and routed, and he had to go back to the city to find protection. What we called Gelon desperately for help, who was nearby and was capturing Carthaginian stragglers and taking them as prisoners. He probably had, the sources say he had 55,000 men, he captured 10,000, but this is sort of improbable. Hieron probably had around maybe 50,000, but he sent his cavalry around to kill Hamilcar and burn the boats because they've gained this information from a messenger about that people of Selinus was in a cavalry force, and Gelon wished to be this cavalry force. And in the land camp, it was a crushing battle. Well, the cavalry really burned down the boats, killed Hamilcar, destroyed the army. Well, the cavalry helped mop up the mess, but this mop up was not necessary, as to demoralize and weakened Phoenicians quickly collapsed under Greek pressure, and many prisoners were taken, maybe half the army. Gelon had scored a decisive victory, killing the king and winning the battle. The first battle of Himera was well, I don't want to say devastating, but it was a devastating defeat for the Phoenicians and to those who spoke Punic. Hamilcar I Mago was killed, and the silly part is that I didn't mention he was sacrificing, and, well, sacrificing to Poseidon. He said he would help him, but he obviously didn't. I mean, notice he doesn't exist. I mean, that just proves it. If you didn't help him, if he sacrificed him and nothing came of it. And he was killed when he was sacrificing, and that was very silly. What he should have done instead was group up his army and make it one camp, and then from there charge Himera, take the city, and try to defeat Gelon. Now, the size of the Carthaginian army is supposed to be 300,000 according to Herodotus and Diodorus of Sicily and all those other guys, but obviously that's too exaggerated, and I'd say they probably had somewhere around 100,000. Well, the little Gelon probably had around, well, maybe not 100, maybe that's too much. Well, Gelon probably had around, let's see, maybe 20,000, and the defenders probably had 10,000, something like that. And it was like 3-1 basically, but they managed to win anyway because of trickery. But I think the Carthaginians were a little bit larger, if not very much larger. Now, obviously, this was a pretty strange victory. One of deceit and deception. Tricking Hamilcar, making him think, oh yeah, the Sicilians cavalry are coming to help us. No, it's not true. It was good old Gelon. Terrorless obviously never regained the city. So, I mean, well, either this took place the same day on the Battle of Salamis, which Herodotus says, or Diodorus says takes place in the same day as the Battle of Thermopylae. Herodotus, though, says a very different account of Hamilcar's death, and he says Hamilcar made certain day making sacrifices in an attempt to get a good omen, but when he saw that the battle was losing, he basically killed himself on the fire, that doesn't even make sense. I don't believe that. Polyaenus also says Gelon did not wish to risk a battle, so he dressed Petiarchus, who was the commander of his archers. He made Claus, Petiarchus, and a group of archers dressed in white, as well as concealed in branches, to make a sacrifice. And this is probably on an outskirts between the armies. Hamilcar came off his own sacrifice, was cut down by a shower of arrows. I believe the first one, basically, whatever Diodorus says about the main battle was close to final, and how he was killed by Gelon, which makes more sense. Obviously, the numbers are exaggerated, but it was a defeat. Cannot doubt that. And this defeat, I want to show to analyze it now. Well, what is defeat? Comments, play, not comments, play. What was the result of this defeat? First of all, the position of Sicily was weak, and they couldn't expand. They wouldn't expand for another 71 years. And they should have done, instead, was expand way more in Africa. I'm not trying to support Hanno the Great, Hanno the Second, saying this, but, makes more sense in terms of the economy, but I don't really think of Hanno and Hamilcar I Mago. But, this battle would destroy Carthage. He says again, this battle would destroy Carthage. Why would this battle destroy Carthage? A very simple reason. Because, well, they were not attacking in the right place. They shouldn't have done that. And the way Hamilcar made two groups shows that it's not a very good setup. And the logistics were bad. But instead what they should have done was train the men at least a little more to fight with the Greeks. Because they probably knew the Greeks were exception. I mean, they read their mythologies. Like the Odyssey and the Iliad, and see how they should fight them like that. But then also, it's kind of silly. That's about what they didn't do it. And other lines with Achaemenid Persia. Well, not Achaemenid Persia. I doubt they ever have one. Because they didn't attack again when the Persians were attacking again. So, I mean, it doesn't make sense. But this proves that if not unified, not politically unified, not really culturally unified. Remember, city-states all have different cultures. Greek city-states all this. A bunch of small states in Sicily could defeat a massive republic. It was a republic, I call it an empire for technical reasons. And then this proves that any country could really defeat Carthage if they tried. And that was why Rome defeated Carthage and destroyed it utterly. I know it's all may sound confusing to you, but after this we'll go to another battle, but there was a lot of men lost in the Carthaginian side. Maybe half the army was imprisoned and the other half was destroyed. Well, on the other side, the Greeks, probably maybe a couple thousand was lost in the fighting, but no significant commanders died. And they failed in their objective, and Tyrrelius never became the tyrant again. And Hieron of Agrigas stayed. And then we'll look at a battle near Rhegium.
The Etruscans attacked the Greek city-state of Cumae, which was sparsely defended. The Cumaeans sent a message to Hieron, who was the brother of Gelon, and they managed to counterattack, destroy the Etruscan ships, and the Etruscans fled from the battlefield, ending the battle. The around 400-year-old civilization of Erytria, or, plural, Etruscans, which were one of the main powers in Italy next to the Roman Republic, which was really small, the Samnites, the Greek city-states of Italy, Magna Graecia, the Gauls and the Celts of the north, But obviously, not to get off on a tangent, but I'm going to get off on a tangent eventually, so let's get off right now. The map you see is obviously of the Eastern Roman Empire in around, I'd say 565, under, well, I won't spoil it because, who knows, I might focus on this period, but it's the Eastern Roman Empire basically, maybe 100 years after the collapse of the West. But again, that has nothing to do with this. Get back to what I was saying, the defeat of the Etruscans in a naval battle, which, was pretty horrible. It was bad. It weakened their navy and expanded Greek influence. Well, not really, but, it showed that the Etruscans were declining, and they were going to decline even further. But why am I including this in Greco-Punic Wars? Because, honestly, the Carthaginians spoke Punic, and Phoenicia at the time was, I think it's pretty obvious it was dissolved by the Achaemenids. The Achaemenid Persian Empire, But, why? Well, because, sometime between, I'd say 540 BC and 535 BC, there was a battle off the coast of Corsica, the Battle of Elalia, between the Greeks and the Carthaginian Etruscans. So this is why. Because the Carthaginians and Etruscans were kind of allies. They shared the same type of, interests. They both wanted to expand their power bases in Italy. And so they allied, and this is why I'm including it, even though it doesn't really have that much to do with Carthage. It makes sense because it shows now both of them, not both of them, that the Etruscans would decline now. But the Battle of Elalia was actually partially a Greek victory, partially now was a Pyrrhic victory. Pyrrhus of Epirus, who I'm actually going to include in these Sicilian Wars because he was the he was the instigator of the last Sicilian War, or the 8th Sicilian War, whatever you want to call it. And obviously in the next video I'm going to include the Athenian expedition to Sicily, which I'm just going to call the Second Sicilian War. You know what? I'll just call this Second Sicilian War. But this battle, the Battle of Cumae, had a great impact. But enough on the impact, and let's get to the impact of the Battle of Himera. Because I know you're all waiting, what are you doing? You're focusing on this battle, now you're focusing on Himera, which is more important, and Cumae. But let's actually get to that. Also, note that the Etruscans had lost in another Battle of Cumae, which is funny. But they lost that Battle of Cumae to the Greeks on land because, the Italian peoples decided to invade the Greek city-states, and they failed. And the Etruscans would eventually be dissolved by the Roman Republic around to the 200s, 260s, I'd say, BC. And it'll be fully absorbed by the Roman Empire by, 27 BC, all that good stuff, Augustus. But let's get actually off these tangents and focus on the effects of the Battle of Himera. Let us wind back 6 years before this Battle of Cumae. The Battle of Himera had just been lost by Carthage. What was the immediate effects? Well, the immediate effects were, first of all, that the leader Hamilcar I Mago was killed,
and he was replaced by either Himilico or Hanno the Navigator. They were two explorers, so how could they be kings? Well, they were, I don't know. Sources vary, but it's either or of them. But anyway, Carthage did not lose any territory. But as you can see from this map, Gelon was powerful. The Greeks were powerful. Theron, Gelon, and Axilus, yeah. Gelon, Theron, I'm confusing it. Theron, Gelon, and Axilus were Greeks. Selinus was a Greek city-state, but it was also Greek. So the Greeks, they had a lot. They had a lot of Sicily. I wouldn't say all of Sicily. I wouldn't say even half of Sicily, because that is not half of Sicily. Yeah. The Siculi were still, and the Helmians, and the Sicani, all those guys. The Morgiet were all free. And the Bruti is also an Italian tribe, and if you want to know what Tyrrhenium Mare is, it means Tyrrhenian Sea. Ionium Mare is Ionian Sea. Siculum Mare is Sicilian Sea, and Africum Mare is African Sea. I think it's pretty obvious, but my language is Latin, obviously. But that clip you see is off the coast of the Carthaginians. So you just it's like I say, or like Tunisia, present-day Tunisia, and obviously based around present-day Tunisia. Also, Anaxius married his daughter to Hieron, who's the brother of Gelon, and Gelon died, and Terralus never regained Himera. And Carthage had to pay 2,000 silver talents, which is not so much, and, they didn't lose territory, And basically, quoting one author, specifically, what's his name? Botsford and Robinson, two different guys. They say, well, maybe it's one guy, I'm not sure. They say that, the quotes, so you can see them 200 pages, or here at least. In the east and west, Hellenism won. Now for 70 years, did Carthage dare attack again, and Persia henceforth was on the defensive. The Greeks refused to work out their destiny. I guess it's a little bit of exaggeration, because destiny was more war. But honestly, they also say it was Hellas against Canaan. Hellas obviously being the Greeks, the Canaanites being the Carthaginians. So, let's see. Oh yeah, another quote is also that, and when he saw there was a rout of his own army, he being then, as a chance, in the act of pouring a libation over the sacrifices, threw himself into the fire, and thus he was burned up and removed from his sight. Pretty sure it's Diodorus or someone else. But also another good fact is that Gelon married Demorati, who was the daughter of Theron, so who was the despot of, or the tyrant of Agricas. And tyrants are not the tyrants we think of today. Tyrants are not people that suppress, they're not people that suppress, they're people that lead against a king, against an oppressor. Which is interesting because today we have distorted the meaning of the word tyrant. But these tyrants are basically military leaders that led the city. I guess in some ways you can call them dictators, but not really. What else does this book say? Oh yeah, it says the victors are proudly conscious of having done their part in freeing allies from the barbarian peril. And in just appreciation, Pindar associated Himera on equal terms with Salamis and Plataea. Who is Pindar? Pindar, this guy was a dude who made odes, Pythian odes, or whatever, something like that.
He was basically a poet. He was like Homer, you know. He wasn't that bad. But let's see what the actual name is. Oh, so it's two names. It's George Willis Botsford and Charles Alexander Robinson Jr. So it's made by these two guys, and they obviously quote a couple stuff, and obviously I quote them. So, you know, you can get this book if you want. It's called Hellenic History. It's pretty good so far. And, you know, I like it, but it has nothing to do with this video. Nothing. I just used a little bit of it for this right now. But another effect was that Carthage did not attack Sicily for another 70 years. And Himera, you know, they remained in Agrabah's position, you know, Theron's position, until 472 BC, when the Ionians attempted a coup, and the city was settled with Dorian. The city was settled with Dorian Greeks by that time, but by 466 BC, the Sicilian Greek cities broken away from Gelon, and, you know, Theron had overthrown their heirs. So there was another Ionic Doric feud, and it continued, which would lead to the Second Sicilian War. Also, Gelon died in 478 BC, and the credit for this map goes not to me, but to this website called turningpointsofAncientHistory.com. And it's a good site which explains the Battle of Himera in parts, and I like it. It's interesting. But the Sicilian Wars would shape the region, preparing it for the Punic. You heard me right. The Punic Wars. The Roman Punic Wars. Which would result in the ultimate destruction of the Carthaginian Empire, or Republic, whichever one I call it, doesn't matter. And it would result in the expansion of the Roman Republic, the collapse of the Roman Republic, the beginning of the Roman Empire, the collapse of the Western Roman Empire, the continuation of the Eastern Roman Empire, the continuation of the Germanic kingdoms, the development of France, the development of Spain, the development of Portugal, the Reconquista. It would result in the development of the British, the Anglos, the Saxons, the Jutes, the Celts. It would result in the development of the Italian states, and the development of the Roman Empire, the Roman German Empire, so called. It was on the development of Austria, of Hungary. It was on the development of Magyars, basically the same thing as Hungarians. It was on the development of the Kievans, and it was all in the development of the Turks. It would also result in the unification of Italy, the unification of Germany. The Reconquista continued, the Crusades, and you know, everything basically. So it's had an impact on now, because if these wars were won, well, if the Battle of Himera was won by Carthage, obviously Carthage would take Himera, and obviously they would probably expand further, taking probably, in my opinion, all of Sicily, and they could do that easily. It would not be that hard. But I'll say this: it did not happen. Carthage did not win the Battle of Himera. They lost it, they lost a leader, and they lost most of their army. In short, the Battle of Himera is one of the most influential battles in history. But honestly, I know I'm talking like 30, 40 minutes, something like that. And you might be bored, you might be seeing what you're doing, just talking, it's so boring. I gotta do it, you know. What else can I fill another battle? I can't make up a battle. There was another battle that encompasses this period. I guess I could talk about the Greeks. The Greek cities feuding with each other, but that's not many battles. Whatever. I'll see. Yeah, that's. Let's. Okay, I'm short for words, but say this. I don't know if we're going to figure it out, but I'll just say this. Goodbye. See you next amazing historical video. By the way, this is a list of battles. C means Carthaginian victory. G means war. The verse. Hieron, or Hieron actually, he died in 467 BC, and Thrasybulus, his brother, you know, died in, I'd say, or thrown in 465, and this was succeeded by a democracy. And this democracy would last until the beginning of Dionysius, who we're going to talk about in the Second Sicilian War. So, this is the list of battles, and inclusion Himera was a very important battle that shaped the path for the Second Sicilian War. And I will actually this time see you in the next amazing historical video. Goodbye, please subscribe and share. Thank you.